Is the Earth flat? There is a growing movement, not just in this country, but around the world, that believes that it is. We're going to talk with David Weiss, host of the Flat Earth podcast, one of the most popular podcasts on this subject, when we come back. This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. We will take your calls as well about whether or not the Earth is flat. 800-848-WABC. It is Groundhog Day. 1-800-848-9222. Straight ahead.
Midnight in the desert, and we're listening.
2:34. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Well, a question that has been debated for literally millennia is the shape of the Earth. What sort of a shape is it? Well, what we've seen in the last few years is an incredible momentum building behind a movement, I guess you'd call it a movement, of people that believe the Earth is flat. Why has this movement taken hold? Well, we have one of the most popular Flat Earth podcasters on the line with us right now, David Weiss. He's the host of the Flat Earth podcast. Hopefully he can give us some answers. David, good morning. Thanks for joining me on the radio this morning.
Good morning, Frank. Glad to be here. Excited about this conversation.
Me too. So let's start from the beginning. Why do you think the Earth is flat rather than spherical like we were taught in fourth grade?
I grew up like everybody else, and I believed what everyone believes, that the Earth is a spinning ball flying through an infinite vacuum. But then one day, not just one day, people started sending me messages, hey, have you looked into Flat Earth? And like any smart person, I would delete those messages and ban them from our social media because for being so dumb, basically, to even suggest such a thing. But then I was forced, kicking and screaming, to look into it. And I went in with a biased attitude to prove it wrong and to prove the globe right. And for 2 weeks, I tried every ball earth proof I thought I had when I actually looked at it and applied actual science and not scientism to it, realized that it was nonsense. And then flash forward 6 years later, here I am talking to you. I'm a host of the Flat Earth podcast, creator of the Flat Earth Sun, Moon, and Zodiac Clock app, and trying to spread this message around the world.
Well, so what led you to believe, based on the science that you studied and your own observations, that the Earth was flat rather than a spinning ball?
So the first thing is we've all been programmed to think that flat Earth is something that it's not. Flat Earth is not a flat pancake flying in space with other flat planets or even round planets. It's nothing like that at all. There's no edge to the flat Earth. Well, how could that be if it's flat? Whereas, what's on the other side, what's on the edge? So the way I like to describe it is, you know what a puddle is? A puddle is where water accumulates at the low spot in the land, and the edge of the puddle is where the water's just higher, the land's just higher than the water, right? Expand that out to a pond, bigger to a lake. Same thing. The edge of the lake is where the land is higher. Well, now think of the whole world as a giant lake. And the land that surrounds us is higher than the level of the ocean. And that land we call Antarctica. Antarctica is the highest land on Earth. It is the edge of the world ocean. So if you sail to the edge of the ocean, you're not going to fall off because you're not at the edge of a pancake. You're at the edge of a lake. And Antarctica, the surface of Antarctica is like 200 feet higher than the water. So you get up there, and then it goes on and on and on. We don't know how far it goes because it's off limits to everybody. The Antarctic Treaty doesn't allow anybody to go there. So that was the first thing that got me. I'm like, why is that off limits? And it's off limits until the year 2041, and nobody can even question the treaty until then.
So the thing that keeps people from sailing off the edge of the Earth is the fact that Antarctica, being elevated so high above sea level, provides sort of an not artificial, but a barrier that keeps people from sailing off the edge of the Earth.
Well, can you sail off the edge of a lake? It's kind of a misnomer where if you sail to the edge of a lake, you don't fall off the lake. You're at the edge of the lake. That's where the land starts. Well, that's what Antarctica is. Antarctica is the land at the edge of our oceans. It's higher than our oceans, so it contains our oceans. So you got to think of the world as a much, much, much bigger place. Antarctica is most likely bigger than all of the oceans and all of the countries combined. It's not a little continent at the bottom of a ball. It's the land that surrounds our world oceans, and it's off limits to everybody. Now, people say, well, you can go there on vacation. You can go tour. There's 15 different companies that you can go for $10,000 to $30,000 just for a couple of days. But those 15 companies are all run by the same guy, so it's only one company. So that was suspicious in itself. But then when you go there, they only take you to a little peninsula. They show you some icebergs and some penguins, and then they bring you to the ceremonial South Pole, and they tell you it's the South Pole, but there's no way to verify it because compasses don't work and GPS doesn't work. And they even tell you it's a ceremonial South Pole, so it's not even a South Pole.
So you believe that, and we're talking with David Weiss from the Flat Earth podcast, you believe that if we had, say, unfettered access to Antarctica, not prohibited from exploration by this treaty, that there would be proof that people could observe for themselves that the Earth is indeed flat?
I believe that the people that are running our world, our leaders, as we call them, when they got, planes that were good enough to explore Antarctica in the, maybe late 40s, early 50s, into the 1950s, they went to Antarctica. And then Admiral Byrd, he did his, the first flight out over Antarctica. And he came back and went on television and said he discovered land bigger than America, filled with resources that no human has ever stepped foot on. And, bigger than America, that's bigger than they're showing us Antarctica is. But then right after he made that speech, he never spoke again, and they started the Antarctic Treaty. All the countries in the world got together, right? They all got together and agreed that we must protect Antarctica. We must protect the penguins and the ice. No one can drop a cigarette butt on this pristine ice. And also it's military, we have to, because our enemies could sneak under the planet and come up and attack us. So those are the two reasons the Antarctic Treaty went into effect, and it goes all the way to the year 2041. And don't think that when we get to 2041, they're just going to open it up. They're going to kick it down the road another 60 years.
Well, if people have questions for David Weiss or the Flat Earth subject, you're welcome to give us a call, 1-800-848-WABC. That's 1-800-848-9222. So what shape is the Earth if it's flat? Is it a circular disc? Is it more like something with four corners, as the Bible might suggest, or is it some other shape?
Well, first, it's not about the shape, but we'll talk about that in a second. It's about the lie, and the lie is when you say why would they lie, the lie is the reason. It's all about control. But let's talk about the shape a little bit. The best way I can describe it is the Earth system, the Earth that we live on, is the basement of the universe. I have no better words to describe it. It's just the foundation of the universe. And we live in this melted puddle that our sun has melted. Our close, small sun has circles around and has melted out these oceans and land masses. So that's where we live. And people say, well, what's on the other side? Well, the deepest hole ever dug, flat Earth or globe Earth, doesn't matter. The deepest hole ever dug is in Russia. It's a Great Borehole or the Great Borehole, something like that. And it's just short of 8 miles, like 7.5 miles, where they couldn't dig any farther. It was too hot, too hard. They hit like an impenetrable barrier, and they couldn't get through it. And so that's, if you want to put that in scale, that's like you have an apple, and you're drilling halfway through the skin of the apple. But the funny thing is, while they were drilling that hole, they were using ground-penetrating radar to see what they were going to hit next, and they were wrong every step of the way. They're like, all right, no more rocks. They hit rocks. Oh, no more water. Then they hit water. So they went halfway through the skin of an apple. They were wrong every step of the way. They hit an impenetrable barrier. They can't get any deeper, but somehow they know what's in the center of the Earth. To me, that's pseudoscience.
Pretty interesting. How do you explain the images that we've seen from space? Are the astronauts that have seen a spherical Earth, are they in on the big lie?
Yeah, Frank. See, this is the part that gets a lot of people because I'm in my late 50s, and I was a kid when the moon landings happened, and these guys are our heroes. But there's a serious problem with NASA and all space agencies. NASA never even uses the word photo. They will never refer to a photo of the Earth. They only call it images and pictures because they don't want to lie directly to us and say that it's a photo. They admit that all of the images of Earth are put together with strips of data from lower altitude flights taking those pictures. They claim it's from satellites or the space station, but that's not true. They're just from high altitude planes and stripped together, and some of them are literally just paintings. There's only 2 photos that NASA has of Earth or images, the 2012 and the Blue Marble. I forget what that one was, a bunch of years later. But if you look at them, it makes no sense. The size of the U.S. is twice the size on one than the other. The proportions aren't right. The Earth is either very tiny or doesn't have as many continents. It's once you look at them, you realize that they're not photographs. They're literally pieces of art.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. In terms of the, do you think that other planets, Mars, Jupiter, Pluto, do you think those are round, or are those bodies also flat?
So here's what we have to kind of get away from is the solar system. The solar system doesn't exist. I call it the soul lure system. Basically, it's a way to steal your soul away. We're going to get into that in a little bit. But other planets, now I can look up. I have access to telescopes and stuff, and I could look up and see Saturn and Jupiter and the alignment we had. There are these things in the sky, but the only thing that we can say truthfully about them is that they're lights. We don't know how big they are. We don't know how small they are. We don't know anything. If you look at Mars or Saturn, you can see it with your naked eye, but it's brighter than any star. You have to believe that the sunlight is reflecting off of that dusty, dirty ball and reflecting back to Earth brighter than any star. It looks like a little piece of the sun sometimes. It's so bright. And science, actual science, the inverse square law of light will teach us that there's no way it could be that bright. So those things that we're seeing are their own lights. They used to be called wandering stars, and now all of a sudden they were named planets.
If people have questions for David Weiss, they can give us a call at 1-800-848-9222. Why, David, would any government, or let alone all the governments, want people to believe that the Earth was round when it's actually flat? What do they gain by lying to the public about that?
Yeah, so it's all about controlling our minds. Now, you would have to, be under the mindset that maybe the government isn't out for our best. Maybe there's some people in the government that aren't out for, the best of the population, and they would want a way to control the people. So if you can convince people that they live on a speck in an infinite universe, spinning out of control, where an asteroid could take them out at any moment, and we're going to run out of dinosaur juice for our cars, and we evolved from a random accident, from a lightning strike that turned into an amoeba, that turned into a fish, that grew legs, that turned into a monkey, that turned into a human, that we are meaningless in the middle of a godless or distant God universe. That's one way, and we're on this prison planet where there's nothing else to discover, versus the reality of our world is that we are on an intelligently designed system where we are at the center of creation, that we are powerful spiritual beings having a physical experience here on this earth realm where nobody has dominion over us. Nobody can take away our God-given free will, and that our thoughts create our reality. And the analogy I use, the documentary with Keanu Reeves called The Matrix?
Sure.
So at the beginning of that, Neo is he's very he's depressed. He's sleeping a lot. Something's wrong with the world. He can't figure it out. And that's because his conscious mind is separated from his soul's journey. And his soul, maybe you can look at your soul as like a piece of God or piece of creation. And your soul is here, knows what it wants to do, but his mind was separated and he's trying to figure it out. Then if you look at him at the end of the movie, when he discovers who he is, where he is, what he is, and the power of his mind, he takes his power back and the system has lost control over him. If everybody knew that the earth was flat, the system would lose control of the people because they would take their power back.
We're talking with David Weiss. He's host of the Flat Earth Podcast, 1-800-848-WABC if you have a question. Sam is in New Jersey. Sam, you're on with David Weiss.
Hi, how are you, Frankie? And how are you, David? I'm happy, David, you're not one of these evolutionist, anti-God people, and you sound like an awesome, smart individual. My question is I think from my little perspective, people, both private industry people and public, forget NASA for a second, they're all retarded people, but they have took their private planes and all and flown east, for example, and they kept at it. They kept going east, yep. And they came back to square A, to square one where they started. How do we explain that?
All right, perfect. Remember, we're on the Earth pond. It's a big circular pond with a bunch of islands. We'll call them continents. And at the center of the pond is the North Pole. Just imagine there's a big magnetic mountain there, and it's the North Pole. All compasses will point towards the center of the lake. So now let's say we're in New York. We're departing 77 WABC, and we get on our boat, and we dead reckon east. So we got our compass. We're on our boat. We hit go, and we just follow that compass needle east. Well, the needle has to always point towards the center, so east will take us in a circle equidistant from the center, and we'll end up in California and back in New York. We'll think we went around a globe because of programming, but in reality, we just went around the neighborhood, around the lake. We went in a circle. East and west are circles, but guess what? That doesn't prove the Earth is flat because that's the same on a ball, right? If you're on a ball 1 mile from the North Pole, and you wanted to go east, you got to point towards the North Pole the whole time with that needle. 3.14 miles later, you're back to where you started from, and you circumnavigated, and you didn't change your heading. East and west are circles. You can also go from the United States. You could head north, and you head north, and as soon as you pass the North Pole, you're heading south, even though you haven't changed directions, and all of a sudden you're in Japan or in Indonesia. Okay? That doesn't prove the Earth is a flat either, because you can do that on a globe. What you cannot do on a flat Earth is go from the tip of South America, Santiago, head south, go over Antarctica, and pop up over in Australia, which should be a fairly short flight. Nobody's ever done it. It's never been done.
Let me ask you, David, why do you think we've had such an explosion in the flat Earth movement over these last couple of years? What's caused this growth?
Yeah, so I'll talk about that. And you made a comment at the beginning, that we've known for years, and it's just only recently. That's not true. All of our history is a lie. So what has caused it? Well, there's always been flat earthers. I interviewed a woman in January of 2020. February of 2020, who was 102 years old. I was down in Florida. I was visiting my mom at where she lived, and I met this woman, and she's 102. She had her wits about her, and I was interviewing her about the World's Fairs because she had been to the World's Fair in New York, and and she lived in Connecticut. And she had such a great memory. She was telling me about her 5th birthday party and who was there. And I asked her what the name of her elementary school was. She knew the teacher, the class, some of the kids in the class, the street it was on, which is better than I could do. And I said to her, what? And I'd never mentioned this to her. And I said to her, what did they teach you in science about the Earth when you were in elementary school? And she looked at me. She goes, they taught me the Earth was flat, but then later on they changed it to a ball. And I asked her if she believed it. She said, yes, I did, because, they told me. And then I told her the whole story about what's going on, and she started crying. It was an amazing story, and I videoed the whole thing. I have it on my YouTube channel. But then we found another woman from Croatia who said in the 1930s, every school was teaching flat Earth. So then we started looking on microfilm and old newspapers, and we found article after article about teachers that were being persecuted in the 1920s here in the U.S. and in Europe for trying to teach heliocentrism in the classrooms, right? So this entire hijacking of our reality happened less than 100 years ago, right? Every civilization before us knew the Earth was flat.
I was on a radio show yesterday afternoon promoting your appearance today, and a few different people brought me criticisms of the Flat Earth movement in general. One person said that there is vicious anti-Semitism within the Flat Earth movement, and another person said that one Flat Earther recently destroyed 500 COVID vaccines. Do you want to respond to either of those, David?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So there is so much controlled opposition keeping this secret. If you Google Flat Earth, you end up at the Flat Earth Society, which is all nonsense. All the images that you see of Flat Earth online are from the Flat Earth Society, and no one believes any of that. That is just to gatekeep your mind. The other thing is they start putting, disinfo agents, agitators, like Antifa, into the movement, and they try to do all these things. So let's address the article about the pharmacist. That guy, the Flat Earth community is pretty tightly knit. Well, we saw that article. It came out today about the pharmacist that got rid of some vaccines. So they're putting anti-vaxxers. They're connecting it with Flat Earth, and he said. So first, nobody has ever seen this guy in any chats, in any comments, and he doesn't have a YouTube channel. He has nothing. So a Flat Earther that has a name that sounds a lot like Heisenberg and looks a lot like Heisenberg from Breaking Bad, that's just a coincidence, I'm sure, came up, and he's a Flat Earther that says the government put a dome over the sky so we can't see God. No Flat Earther has ever even thought of that concept, okay? So it's a totally made-up story. And then addressing the other part about anti-Semitism, well, everybody loves me, and I'm Jewish, so I don't know where that's coming from. Other than Eric Dubé, who's one of the early Flat Earthers, he has some questions about the Holocaust, and he put out some videos. Now, he's not an anti-Semite. He had questions about the Holocaust. Well, the media took that and connected them together and said Flat Earthers are anti-Semites. The other thing the media put out there is crazy Flat Earther kills himself trying to prove the Earth is flat in a homemade rocket. Well, Mad Mike Hughes, the guy was a Flat Earther. He was smart enough to know the Earth was flat, but he was an Evel Knievel stuntman who wanted to get the world record for a steam-powered rocket jump. He was going to jump like 1,800 feet. There's buildings in New York that are way taller than that. So he wasn't doing it to prove the Earth was flat, but he needed money for some new steam, compressors, and this was going to be a big televised event. So he was trying to raise money. So some Flat Earthers said, hey, we'll raise the money for you if we can put a billboard on your rocket that says research Flat Earth.
I see.
So the media took that and said, oh, this guy tried to prove the Earth was flat in his little steam-powered rocket and killed himself.
David,
again, another media story.
I have to pause, but it's a fascinating subject and a fascinating conversation, and I'm wondering if we can pick a day within the next week or two to continue the discussion.
100%.
Thank you. David Weiss, check out the Flat Earth podcast. Yeah.
And the Flat Earth Sun, Moon, and Zodiac Clock app on Android and Apple has all the stuff that Google's hiding from you.
There you go. Flat Earth, Zodiac, Sun, and Moon on Google
Sun, Moon, and
Apple.
Zodiac Clock app by Blue Water Bay.
There you go.
So you know you have the right one.
Blue Water Bay. 1-800-848-9222 if you want to comment. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano, 77 WABC.
The Flat Earth Sun and Moon Clock app. A dynamic new app to teach family and friends about where they actually live. The sky is a perfect clock. The sun measures the hours and days. The moon measures the weeks and months. The star constellations measure the seasons and years. 12/12 or 24-hour clock face. Or go hands-free. The Flat Earth Sun, Moon, and Zodiac Clock app with new added features. World Time. See what time it is all around the flat Earth. A true Earth compass that shows true navigation across and around the flat Earth plane. Weather. Tap for detailed local weather information. Know what phase and where the moon is at all times. Watch the sun travel between the tropics for the seasons. Select an amazing background. add your own, or have the app change it to a new one automatically every time you use the app. Add a countdown to your next big date. Learn the truth about our world with the featured video of the day. Web button for additional Flat Earth related features, from the mythical curve calculator all the way to Tartaria. Video playlists in different languages. See the real trade winds circling the flat Earth, and clean screen features. Simply click off the items you don't wish to see. The Flat Earth Sun, Moon, and Zodiac Clock app is the best tool to show your friends and strangers how our flat Earth actually works.